Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know that you are tired, so am I. But let's hold up. And okay, that's good then. And I hope that you would pay attention. So my part concerns with the linguistic considerations, and I'm going to talk about bilingualism and the interference of the first language and second languages, and the order of acquisition. And then I'm going to tackle some of the issues in the first language acquisition, but this time they are revised, but have already been tackled by our friends in the previous presentation, and then some methods that reflect second language acquisition. Now let's start with linguistic consideration. The first is bilingualism. We all know that bilingualism is the ability to speak two languages proficiently, and still there is a debate to what extent or to what level of proficiency should the learner master the two languages system to be named a bilingual. And actually, among sociolinguists, this gave birth to many different types of bilingualism. Bilinguals. And then we have compound, coordinated, social, individual. But this is more sociolinguistic than psycholinguistic. If we want to relate this notion of bilingualism to psycholinguistics, I mean, according to Douglas Brown, when the learners tend to internalize two language system, the process is slower than when they internalize one language system. Okay, this is the main idea when we talk about second language acquisition. However, many research have shown that there are great benefits of being a bilingual, both social and cognitive. Now, the interference of first and second languages. For young learners, research confirms that linguistic and cognitive processes on second language learners are in general similar to the one of first language process. So generally, when we learn a second language, we tend to go through the same processes that we go through learning the first language. And there was an experiment done by Burt and DeLay in 1974 who actually advocated this idea and found out that 80% of more than 500 errors made the Spanish-speaking children learning English reflected the normal developmental characteristics, that is, expected intralingual, and not, it's missing interference of the first language, okay? So when we tend to learn a second language, we don't necessarily tend to learn it via the interference or the mediation of the first language, but mostly we kind of follow a natural order that even the first learners following to learn their first languages. Adult second language and linguistic processes are more vulnerable to those effects of the first language on the second. Whether adults learn a foreign language inside or outside the classroom, they approach the second language either focally, that is to say, they consciously do it, they focus on it, or peripherally, or that is to say, systematically following an order, and then they attempt to formulate linguistic rules on the basis of whatever linguistic information is available to them, either from the first language or from the teachers, from the classmates, from the peers. So it's not just from the first language interference. So this is the main idea. According to Douglas Brown, adults more cognitively secure, and Zakaria talked about these aspects of security in learning language among adults, appear to operate from a solid foundation of the first language and thus manifest more interference. So there is an idea. However, researchers show that adults can make some of the same types of errors found in the children learning their first language. Again, this is what I've just mentioned. More than that, the interference of the first language can be a facilitation, more than an interfering factor. So sometimes, yes.
Just concerning what you mentioned about feeling secure. Zakaria has mentioned before, it's different from what we have.
In what sense? Yeah. Sorry?
It's only for grammar.
The grammar is a part of language learning.
What he is actually is the second language learners tend to be secure when they are learning through an active way. For example, by learning grammatical relations and so on. So You don't feel secure when language is presented in a certain interactive way.
But
Yeah, but
I don't get your point here.
Security can manifest itself in different ways.
Yeah.
That's one dimension of security. Here is another dimension, which means that people who already have the first language, they have gone through the process and so on, gives them some security to learn another language, cognitively speaking. That adults, more cognitively secure, appear to operate from the solid foundation of
First
third
language.
acquisition.
Yeah.
It's another dimension or another way how security manifests itself. Okay? They have already known the first language. Okay? So they have some background, they have some cognitive abilities to enable them to feel more secure learning a second language. Okay? Then the other one is another way of feeling security. But the main thing here is security. Okay?
Yeah. So as I've just mentioned, other researchers show that adults make some of the same types of errors found in children learning their first language. More than that, as I told you, the interference itself should not be viewed as a negative aspect of second language learning, because sometimes it can be very facilitating, especially when the two language systems are similar.
So how does this first language give them cognitively speaking security? This manifests itself again in terms of interference. That's why if you know people, adults learn a second language, they do more interference, which means that they rely on their abilities of acquiring first language to learn a second language and a second, third, or whatever. Okay, that's why there is this idea of interference. Interference in the sense that they use some of the rules of their first language and apply it to the second language they are learning. So that's why there are errors. Interference, you can have interference at different levels. Is it another field of research?
Yeah.
Yes.
Interference. Complete, vast field of research where you can study the types of interference errors or interference in general that is taken place at the level of phonology, the level of grammar, so syntax, okay, even pragmatic semantics, okay. So it's another field.
Different events like with like learners who, for example, native speaker of for example, Dutch, and he's like learning German. There's a lot of similarity between the two, or Spanish and Italian. Italian, Romanian, because they develop the same like language in Latin. So if it's secure, there are a lot of similarities, and they make a lot of references to their mother tongue.
Yes, this is another way of showing more security if the two languages they resemble each other. For example, like French, English, the security is much better. But when it is related to Amazigh and then you go to French, the security, there is security.
Lower.
Yes, but there is security, but very low.
Exactly.
By comparison to the first case.
Exactly.
It's also find how there is this relationship concerning the use of strategies and such as generalization or simplification of language. It's done in the same way as children do in their one and so on. So there's a very close relationship between the two. There are some differences that exist.
So here you are talking about something different. You are talking about the characteristics of a child learning language and the processes they can do, like overgeneralization. So here, what we are talking about is like interference in terms of word order. You can have interference in terms of word order, like the word order in Amazigh is not the same in French.
Yes.
So you can have applying the same order of Amazigh to the very beginning of the process of learning a second language, apply the same word process. Word order to learning French or English. It's one way. So that's what we're talking about here, okay? We're not talking about overgeneralizing. This is related to first language acquisition. You can have interference in terms of words, okay? Wait, this is another. Yes, go on.
Okay. So the next point is about the order of acquisition. The order of acquisition is a concept in language acquisition that all learners of a given language will learn the grammatical features of that language in roughly the same order. And be they, for example, first or second, the adult or children. Sometimes we tend to learn the simple past before the past perfect and so on and so forth. And the reason of the order of the acquisition is less stable among the adult learners is not known, but generally it is thought that it's due to either to the effects of the language transfer, the interference of the mother tongue, or the other interferences by mental processes that second language learners have developed. Now I'm going to move to the issues in the first language acquisition. And those issues have already been mentioned and explained in the previous presentation. But in the previous presentation, they dealt more with the first language acquisition. And here we are going to relate them to the second language acquisition. And first, we are going to start with dichotomy competence and performance. As we know that competence is the underlying linguistic ability that makes learners communicate in a given language, and it's an observable ability, okay? Whereas performance is the observable manifestation of the competence itself. And second language acquisition studies focus more on the competence. But since the competence is unobservable, they rely on the performance in order to measure the competence of the learners. And the problem here, or the question is, to what extent the performance reflects the competence, because sometimes it's inconsistent. And according to Douglas Brown, for example, when we talk about learning grammar, in second language learning, students tend to, when, for example, we judge the grammatical utterances, students or adult learners or learners of second language learners try to consciously judge the grammaticality of the sentence. Whereas children who are learning first language tend to do so by intuition, not necessarily by being aware of the linguistic items underlying those grammatical sentences. The second point is comprehension versus production. Typically, we tend to relate comprehension to competence and production to the performance. According to Douglas Brown, actually, let's say, when you ask a student, for example, do you speak English, a second language learner? Here we mean both, are you able to understand, to comprehend the language, and at the same time to produce it, not necessarily produce the language. And as teachers, when we teach, for example, or when we test our students, we should take into consideration that the inability of students to produce certain utterances does not necessarily reflect lack of their comprehension of those items, because sometimes we can comprehend an item, but it's not sufficient. We are not sufficiently psychologically or physically enough to produce them, and we are going to see this with the approaches. Now, the nature and the nurture aspects. That is to say, generally we are endowed with a language faculty. That is to say, LAD. Remember LAD? Language acquisition device that enables any learners. Be they, for example, adults or children learning first or second or foreign languages, to learn any language. But the problem here is when the learners of second language learners fail to learn the second language, it's not necessarily due to the absence of this innate capacity, but to other variables and to other cognitive and affective variables. And actually, Douglas Brown suggested that we should investigate on those variables rather than probing on the aspects of innateness in the language. Universals. And here we are talking about universal grammar. That is to say, all the languages share basic principles. That is to say, for example, all languages have verbs, have phonological system, and so on and so forth. So, yes, sorry? Yeah, that's it here. So universal English grammar here says that researchers fall into the confusion of detecting exactly whether the second language learning is learning taking place is due to the mediation of the second language or to the resource of this universal source of the language. And still it's debatable among the learners, because Douglas Brown thinks that even first language learners, as children, have only partial access to the universal grammar, not full access of it. And thus other researchers, this led other researchers to conclude the same, that even second language learners or adult learners do the same. That is to say, they have just partial access to the universal grammar. System, yeah?
I think the universal has also to do with the properties that language. All
Yeah,
languages
I talked
share.
about this. It's the principles. I talked about this. I show all languages have verbs, phonological system, pronunciation, etc. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they already dealt with this, and the previous session just trying to relate it to the second language more than the first language. Systematicity and variability. I mean, all languages are characterized by systematicity and variability. With systematicity, we mean that mostly we tend to systematically learn a second language in the way that first language learners learn their mother tongue. Okay, for example, we mostly engage in the rules of overgeneralization and the rules of deducing rules from the given language input and so on and so forth. And variability here it talks about there are many variables that make second language learning different from first language learning. We have cognitive, affective, contextual. For example, when we talk about contextual, we learn second language in our country. It's different from learning it in the foreign country or learning it in educational settings. So these variables actually also account for or affect the learnability of a language. So language and thought. It is, let's say, universally acknowledged that thought affects the way, for example, we use language, and vice versa. Language, again, affects thought. And this interdependence, which should be studied when teaching our students second language learning. That is to say, for example, when we tend to expose our learners to a second language, they tend to relate the old meaning with the new meaning. Sometimes we tend to reformulate the whole system of conceptualization. And the teacher should be aware of the different cultural and language patterns that exist in those languages. For example, when we talk about God, for example, we have already studied this example. When teaching it, for example, Muslims, it's different when you teach it for Christians, because in Christians they believe that there is a triangle, that Ruh al-Qudus and this. Yeah, but we believe in all what we all believe in Islam, in that exists one Allah. Yeah, and sorry, yeah. Imitations. Sorry. And also, for example, when we talk about the example of owl, in Arabic it has a bad sign, okay, bad omen. But in English, for example, speaking countries, they tend to, it has the symbol of wisdom and so forth. So, yeah, imitations. Here it goes with the behavioral aspects or psychology, in which they claim that language is learned via imitating, via echoing what has been said. And according to Douglas Brown, children tend to imitate the deep structure, that is to say, focus on meaning, not on the surface structure, whereas second language or adult learners tend to focus on the rules, okay, on the, let's say, surface structure. And thus, as teachers, we should pay attention to this aspect in the sense that we should provide our learners with contextualized language input. That is to say, which both on the surface and the deep structures. Practice and frequency, that is to say, practicing frequently language leads to learning it much better and much, especially if you practice it in natural context with appropriate language use. And input, in second language learning, parental input is replaced by the teacher, mostly input or societal input, and it should be contextualized again and appropriate in order to develop the linguistic competence of students in its totality. The discourse, that is to say again, the input that students are subject to should develop students' discourse competence. That is to say, the ability to combine both forms and the meanings in order to convey a message, either in written or spoken form, and in different genres again. Now, the last part has to do with language teaching methods. I see some smiling faces because we are about to end here, okay? So the first one is total physical response. We already know about the total physical response. James Asher, who is the founder or the father figure of total physical response, noted that children in learning their first language appear to do a lot of listening before they speak. So there is a lot of input is taking place before the output, and that the listening is accompanied by physical responses. For example, we tend to tell students, open the door, open the window, and then they just physically respond to those commands, as you say. And you also give attention to right brain learning. According to Asher, motor activity is right brain function and should precede the left brain processing. That is to say, when we are exposed to the input, we tend to activate our right hemisphere, okay? And it takes charge all of this input. And once it is sufficiently equipped, it triggers the left brain in order to produce language, which takes charge of the language production.
That's why there is focus more on the listening and response.
Exactly.
Motor activity.
Sorry?
Motor activity is the right brain function that should precede.
Exactly. Yeah.
Left brain language processing.
First you give them input and then, exactly. Now, Asher also was convinced that language classes should be as stress-free, that is anxiety-free, comfortable as possible, where learners would not feel overly self-conscious and defensive. So the total physical response classroom then was one in which students did a great deal of listening and acting, as you have just mentioned. And the teacher was very directive in orchestrating the performance. And Asher stated that the instructor is the director of a stage play in which the students are the actors. That is to say, they perform more than the produce output. So the natural approach, not the natural order with correction. So the natural approach advocates that we should expose learners in natural contexts where language is used. That is to say, we should create conditions in which we teach language which reflect the natural conditions that are outside the classroom. One of the hallmarks, qualities or good qualities of Krashen's theories is that adults should acquire a second language just as children do. They should be given the opportunities to pick up language and should not be forced to speak until they are ready, because children, normally they tend to listen a lot and before they produce.
Because in the first presentation, we talk about marginal approach or order, okay, in which there is more focus on listening and response. Yes. Okay.
Yes. So acting on many claims of that Asher and made the tip. Your question or the natural approach draws a lot from the total physical response. And Krashen in turn felt that learners would benefit from delaying the production until speech emerges in the left hemispheric, and that learners should be relaxed as much as possible in the classroom, and that a great deal of communication and acquisition should take place as opposed to analysis of every bit of language while they are being exposed to it. Now, the most controversial aspect of the natural approach were, the silent aspects, were its silent period and its reliance on the notion of comprehensible input. That is to say, natural and total physical approach advocates that we should give students, we should expose them to the input and give them some silent period in which they internalize, cognitively the language system. And it's debatable because they say that how can we measure whether learning is really taking place or no if they don't produce it? Okay? So one could argue that the delay of oral production can be pushed too far, and that at the early stage. And it's important for the teacher to step in and encourage students to talk, because language learning is an interactive process, and therefore the over-reliance on the role of the input at the expense of the simulation of language.
Can you
Yeah.
proceed last part of your slide.
I don't know here because
Yes.
I tend to.
Okay, go.
Yeah, sorry.
I want to come back to the very beginning of the presentations today, which you talked those myths, and we said that those many people try to imitate how things take place in acquisition. So now we see that there is a total physical approach, response approach, and then there is a natural approach. We try to imitate that. Now, what is the problem? Is that there are some deficiencies
Exactly.
in those theories for learning or teaching the language.
Yeah.
One could argue the delay of the oral production can be, etc. It is important for the teacher to go into involving the students into producing, rather than just keep listening and acting.
Yeah.
Okay, because language learning is an interactive process, and therefore a number of lines of the role of input and expressors is not enough.
Stimulation of it.
Okay, so this is one way that shows that those myths we have raised in the beginning were lacking
And so,
some background.
exactly.
Okay, so thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you very much. Yes.
So tomorrow morning, we're going to have another class.